So you're interested in doing EMDR, but you can't find a therapist, you can't afford it. You're interested in looking into some different options. So I'm going to talk to you today about a software called VirtualEMDR. I'll show you a little bit about how it works, and you'll hear from some people who have used this and really benefited from it. So I am an EMDR approved consultant. I was a psychotherapist for 20 years. I no longer do EMDR with people. I no longer do psychotherapy, but I started this channel to really bring information to people around the world about tools and techniques to live a more joyful life. And given that I'm pretty traditionally trained, particularly with regard to EMDR, I do always like to say that if you can find an EMDR therapist to work with, it's probably the best way to go if you find somebody well-trained who you trust, who you get along with. But I also know a lot of people are looking for options of things they can do on their own. So you'll hear today from a few people that I interviewed about how the virtual EMDR website worked for them, like Eric.
I literally felt like it was a reset. Like it was like a reset. And I got to there were so many core beliefs that I wrote down. And I was like, oh my God, I have so many negative core beliefs about myself and I don't even realize. So that was the biggest takeaway from the EMDR.
And then I'm also going to show you the website, and then I'm going to log in and show you what it looks like inside when it's helping you walk through this process. And I'm going to add some of my thoughts as an approved consultant for EMDR on things you might want to do to enhance your experience using it. So I'll quickly just show you the website before you log into it. It talks about it being affordable, accessible, anonymous, all of which is very useful. About 10,000 sessions of EMDR are being done every month by the people using this service. 90% of people say they feel a noticeable improvement after their session, right? There's a question towards the end, so it calculates that. 85% are 30 minutes or shorter, and 60% of sessions are done after 6 p.m. in the person's time zone when therapists are often not available. And the website does have different protocols, sort of different processes it moves you through based on a number of different things people are struggling with. So you can go to one of these and receive a little bit more information about it and how EMDR helps with it. All right, I should mention before we move on, they do have some free diagnostic tests. Again, they're not like definitive diagnosis. That comes from a doctor, but they're more like screenings, to be honest. But you could screen to see do I really have this problem? How bad? All of that. So that's available for you as well. All right, the more interesting stuff is inside. So I am going to log in and then share the inside with you. I logged in and I did use this service before I became an affiliate with them and worked through a couple of things. And recently there's been something up in my life, so I'm going to be working with it again. But anyway, I logged in, gives me a welcome. This is the screen you would see after logging in. There is quite a bit of information about getting started. There's a little video you can watch, tips on getting ready for it, how you use it, what the process is. So plenty of information. It is very useful to have headphones or earphones to listen to the bilateral audio tones. It works more effectively with a headphone than just your computer screen. And I want to point out this section over here on tools because there's those self-assessment tests that we talked about. But very important is the grounding exercise. Now, if you were doing EMDR with a therapist, the therapist ideally would be working through with you means that you can use to self-regulate. That means if you get really, really upset, what can you do to calm down, right? Or if you get really, really depressed or frozen, what can you do to pick yourself up? So these are things we do to self-regulate. And it's very important to have some in your back pocket that can help you because EMDR can be intense. So I do have a video that talks about whether EMDR on your own is a good idea. And the guidance I give is that if you can do a safe place exercise successfully, if you can access a feeling of safety with some guidance, that would be a positive thing indicating this might work for you. I do have a YouTube video on the safe place exercise and then also one on grounding exercises. And honestly, I think those videos are probably others you can find a little bit more helpful than what's described here because this is sort of telling you stuff, but it's not really leading you through it. So it might be worth taking a moment and practicing a couple of grounding exercises, practice the safe place visualization, make sure you can do those and they're they're kind of tools you can put in your pocket for when you need them. But this is useful. Read through it. I do use the butterfly hugging over here. This I find to be it's sort of like alternate tapping. So it does the same bilateral stimulation that happens in your brain with the EMDR, but you're doing it with just sort of gentle tapping. It's kind of a very cozy feeling to have a butterfly hug. And you can use this while you do a safe place exercise, or you can just bring up being in a beautiful place you love to be, bring up a happy moment, bring up something positive and tap it in. And it just helps your whole body experience it. All right, so that's a little background and preliminary stuff to do to make sure you're ready to go through with the process. So another thing over here in Tools is my session data. And as I mentioned, I only just started using this again. So I'm going to click on this here. Shows you I did one session. So as I did my session, this says I did it for 87 minutes. I actually didn't because I was also just kind of working on what I would record in a video for you guys, but I also was doing it for myself. So that really incorporated some processing. I used a particular worksheet, a particular protocol within the program, which I'll show you. And then I also took a couple of self-assessment tests. So that's all summarized here. And then this is kind of interesting because I wouldn't even necessarily have remembered this. And I will tell you that when I used to do EMDR with people, this is what would happen is they'd be like, oh, I don't think I ever was at an 8. So when I started my session, it asks you to rate how distressing the event is that you're thinking of. I was at an 8 when I started and I dropped to a 5 during that first session. So it still isn't at a 0. I got more work to do, but that's pretty dramatic. And it is interesting that I would have told you, oh yeah, no, it wasn't really that high, but it was up at an 8. Anyway, it's kind of interesting. And that would happen all the time. My clients would come in and they'd be like, well, I never was really all that upset about that to begin with. And I would be like, well, you were, you told me it was an 8. So the system kind of does that for you. All right, let's go back. So you begin a self-guided session and you'll see here the different protocols that they have set up, which guide you with slightly different questions. And if what you are struggling with doesn't fit any of these particular protocols, you can use the standard. But I'm going to pull up the anxiety one because I think a lot of the people who watch my channel struggle with anxiety. So the site will prompt you with a number of questions, and I'm not going to walk you through every screen, but you'll see that it will ask you how you're feeling. The system checks to make sure you've set aside enough time for your session. Here it says 40 minutes. I think there's somewhere else they suggest about 20. They don't recommend doing this for a very, very long period of time, but I'd say somewhere in the 20 to 40 minutes is useful. And you don't really want to be interrupted in the middle of doing your EMDR processing if possible. So the system prompts you with what you might be feeling. So let's check intrusive thoughts, feelings of anxiety, maybe fear of a future event, right? But whatever you're feeling, you can kind of check. And as you see, it will keep a record for you. And then it tells you a little bit about the anxiety protocol. It lets you know that anxiety affects 1 out of 5 people. It is super common. So then there's a number of screens about target selection. And this is super important. So the website suggests that a target could be a disturbing memory. It could be sort of negative thoughts or disempowering thoughts, unwanted emotions, sensations, or reactions you're having. It could be something you're struggling with today as well. It could be like, okay, here's the scenario that's happening. And to make sure that whatever target, whatever issue, image, particular memory you are targeting, that you do go through the process of identifying the associated images, sounds, smells, the feelings and emotions that go with it, the physical sensations, and then it will lead you to another screen where it summarizes what you've said and helps you come up with your concrete target. And again, this is what a therapist would help you do if you were working with somebody in person. You're then asked to rate the level of emotional distress that goes with that target, with that image, with whatever it is you came to the program with today to work on. How upsetting does that feel on a scale of 0 to 10? 10 is off the charts, most upsetting thing in the world. 0, not at all. And that's exactly a question question I would ask a client if I was fleshing out the whole situation to come up with what we were going to target. And then the program walks you through an identification of your negative core beliefs. So the system gives you a list of common negative beliefs and helps you kind of pick ones that go with the thing you're working on. Now, this is a really important part. And I actually found working in person with people that this was really hard for them to do, really getting to the core, that negative core belief. So I do have a video on it, and I also do have a PDF called Transform Your Negative Core Beliefs that initially helps you identify what those real core beliefs are. And then in that PDF, I also give you 3 methods of transforming the negative core beliefs, which is not the full EMDR, but it is ways to work with the positive core belief, the positive that would counter the negative. And I give you 3 methods of strengthening the positive belief that can counter that negative one. And that's something in EMDR that we call resourcing. And resourcing is also like the grounding exercise that we talked about earlier, the safe place exercises. These are things to sort of resource and strengthen your coping skills in the moment today. Like what can help you feel better right now. And they're very good for that emotional self-regulation. So the PDF walks you through a few of those. It's in the notes to this video in the description. It's free. If you want to download it, feel free. I think it goes with this online software quite well. So then you're ready to move into the process of the desensitization. That's the first step in the processing where you take that 8 or 9 or 10, that very upsetting event, and you kind of desensitize yourself to it by going over it and over it, by bringing up the same event while you're doing the bilateral stimulation. This is what desensitizes you to that event. And it really does desensitize you if you can do this. And I'll show you in a minute the light bar that the program gives you. And then it also has a sound thing. So using headphones are the best for the audio bilateral stimulation because the tones will alternate one ear to the next. You can also do a self-tapping either with the eye movements or the audio. Again, when I was working with people, I found that some people responded really, really well to the eye movement piece. Other people found it easier to really bring up the memory if they closed their eyes and listened to the audio sounds or did the tapping. In my clinical experience, and I think I did EMDR for more than 15 years. I was a therapist for 20 and got trained in EMDR a little bit into it. But in any case, in my clinical experience, I thought that any one of those bilateral stimulation techniques were equally effective. It really depended on the person and what their preference was. Some people got headaches with the eye movements or felt dizzy or didn't like it. Some people hated the noises. Some people hated the tapping. Everybody was a little bit different. Some people used all 3. So see what works for you. So the eye movement tool, the first time you use it, you can change the color. I changed mine actually to blue. I think it started as a red maybe, and I think it started with a different background, but I kind of liked the dark background and I picked the blue. You can change the audio tone. You can change the object speed, how fast the light bar moves. And this is a little more advanced. So I'd recommend starting with just this pathway. I'll show you what that looks like. So that's basically what the eye movement piece looks like. So if you see down here, the object path, if you click a different direction, it will move it in a different direction. Let me show you. And you would just follow with your eyes. And actually, I was just moving my head, so it's better to hold your head still. But the website has timing to it. So it will keep the light bar moving a certain amount of time, and then it will pause. During the pause, it asks you for some reflections, which is what a therapist would do. And then you use the bar again. And you really keep doing that until you've really, really dropped the intensity of the issue you're dealing with. When it begins to feel desensitized, then you can either close out the session or move on to the next step, which is to begin to enforce and instill the positive core belief. So again, program keeps walking you through it. Now, I have a few caveats. And as I said, I do feel like a qualified, well-trained, compassionate EMDR therapist, probably the best way to go. But given the issue of cost, time, accessibility, for people who are functioning well enough, self-regulated enough, I think this can be a great option. Now, in the people I spoke to, I did send an email to my whole list and just asked if there was anybody on the list who was using virtual EMDR who would agree to be recorded. And a couple of people, brave people, agreed. But of the people I spoke to, most of them mentioned cost, that they had either been seeing an EMDR therapist or a different type of therapist, and the expense just began to add up. One person said she was paying about $200 a week, which would not be unusual for the area I live in. Insurance doesn't always cover it, which is very unfortunate. So definitely people mentioned cost. They also mentioned convenience. So let's talk about pricing for a moment. And if you use the link, if you use my link and my code, you can get 20% off. So my affiliate link is in the description to this video. Using that link also supports my channel, which I greatly appreciate. Helps me make this free content that goes around the world to hopefully help people around the world, right? So anyway, pricing. They have it structured by the month. So you can do unlimited sessions. If you sign up for just 1 month, it ends up being $69, and then use Awake Enjoy 20 in the coupon code and you'll get the 20% off. And if you sign up for 3 months, it ends up being less than $50 a month. So the $149 is for all 3 months, etc. Way less expensive than therapy in most parts of the United States. And again, you can use this whenever you want. You can do unlimited sessions. So I think from a cost point of view, this is pretty reasonable. I understand because my videos do get watched worldwide, not necessarily around the world is this possible, but this is one option for those of you who don't have a therapist, don't want to go to a therapist. And I'm going to share a little bit more about what the people that I spoke with said about using this software. One of the people who was working with it very effectively, she began working with the virtual EMDR website while she was working with an EMDR therapist. She would just use the website in between sessions to accelerate her progress, and that worked very well for her. There are actually some therapists who will use this software with their clients, and they're listed on the virtual EMDR website. And then a couple of the people I talked to used it totally on their own. So I want to share another clip from one of the people I spoke with where he talks about how he felt like the ball that moves across the screen kind of erased the effect of the anxiety, phobia, and panic attacks that he was having. So the first time you did it, you imagine kind of like the worst of this fear in a scenario, and your anxiety went up while you were doing it with all the physiological. And then when they had you walk through the positive, it kind of calmed everything down a bit.
Yeah. So it's funny, right? While you're looking at the ball moving from so I bring up a thought, right? Like, let's say I'm at the mall and I'm by the ledge where I can look down. So I'm feeling the anxiety, right? I'm bringing it to mind and I keep bringing it and bringing it and bringing it. And it's kind of like the ball is kind of just erasing the effect of what I feel. It's really weird. But I will say that the first time, right, I was so excited.
And then Paul, who I spoke to, who kind of said this was the best thing he's ever done for himself in terms of really healing some core stuff. When I asked him whether he would recommend this to other people, this is what he said.
Well, and again, all I can do is come from my perspective. It just made such a huge difference for me. I just encourage everybody to do it. Just do it. I mean, it's I don't know. I guess for some people it's expensive. It's to me, it costs nothing, relatively nothing, and just try it. I couldn't believe the difference it made. And everything that I've done in my life that's made little bits of difference, but EMDR was the huge thing that really made a huge, big jump for me.
Another person I spoke with said that while the virtual EMDR site did help her reduce the anxiety she was feeling recently, it didn't work as well as when she had actually done EMDR with a therapist, which had been about 10 years earlier. So she felt that the system, the virtual EMDR program, helped her desensitize, but didn't really help her get to that piece of reprocessing. That doesn't surprise me. I think that could be how a number of people would feel. The reprocessing piece requires seeing the situation differently. If you have a core memory from childhood and you developed a belief of I'm bad, it really helps to have somebody else sitting with you who said, look, you were 5 years old, you broke a lamp. You weren't bad. You were a kid. You were a normal kid. Or maybe you were a hyperactive kid, but that's okay. You were a kid. You weren't responsible for that. So that piece of reframing and beginning to see the situation in a totally different way can happen through doing the EMDR, but sometimes it really does help to have somebody else sitting there and validating it and reinforcing it. So That will be up to you. And that just reminds me, another little tip here. EMDR therapists are given a lot of different tools and techniques to bring in with clients who have different issues. But for somebody who almost can't do the EMDR because it's too intense, we do use a technique called the movie technique, where you really try to see the event that happened as a movie. You separate yourself from it and you see it on a screen happening to somebody else. And if you can do that while using the bilateral stimulation, that can really help you see it in a different light, which will both help you tolerate it and also help you reprocess it because you're really seeing it differently. Okay, I really hope this is super helpful, and I would really love to hear what your experiences are like if you choose to use this software. Any questions, post them in the comments to the video. I do try to go through them and respond. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe to my channel. Give this a thumbs up if you liked it, and I will see you next week.